Welcome to Plenary 1, everybody. Stand up. The coffee break is 50 minutes away. I know you need to stretch your legs. All right. And now, oh, and there's some more stretching going on. Thank you. And now sit down. Very good. One of the key themes that we're going to be talking about over the next 2 days, decarbonization, safer, greener mobility for all. Is that possible, panel? This is what we're going to be talking about. It's so good to have you all here. Mohammed Mezgani, hello.
Hello.
What does it have on your business card?
Secretary General of UITP, the International Association of Public Transport.
Excellent. You can stay.
Thank you. Stay with us.
Elaine Buckberg, so good to have you. What does it say on your business card, your official title?
I'm the Chief Economist of General Motors.
Ooh, hello. So many questions. I know online people going, we have questions already. Dr. Holmes Hummel, so good to have you. Please introduce yourself to the audience. What is your official title?
I lead the Energy Equity and Just Transitions portfolio for the Institute for Energy at Stanford University.
Does it go around the other side for your title on your business card? It's a lot going on here.
It's a large organization.
Good to have you. And Felipe A. Ramirez, welcome.
Thank you. Urban Mobility Director for WRI.
All right. This idea of safer, greener transport for all, just before we kind of get into the conversation, is that possible? It is?
Yes.
Okay, good. Mohammed, is that possible?
Of course it's possible.
Yeah?
Yes, and there are many ways to do it.
Felipe?
Yeah, it's possible. Many good examples around the world.
No doubt.
Yeah, okay, good. All right, that's a really good place to start. I am just thinking about the UITP because of what you do in international transport and strategies. Because nobody hesitated. When I said, is that possible? With a question mark, you're like, yes, no. So let's get into the strategies, Mohammed, that you use as an international organization for decarbonization. How are you leading the world?
Thank you. If I may, I would like to remind 2 or 3 numbers.
Okay.
Because it will explain why and how what we do. Of course, everyone knows that transport represents 25% to 30% of CO2 emissions. But what's important is that 90% of these CO2 emissions are from road transport. And half of it is related to cars. And 70% of CO2 emissions are taking place in the city. So it means that the priority is the city and the metropolitan areas, and the priority is to have less people using cars. I would say even less ownership of cars. And less individual use of cars. And for us at UITP, public transport is everything except the individual use of cars. Cycling, walking, scooter sharing, ride hailing, etc. is part of public transport. And this is our approach, is to make people use these modes, because we know that mass public transport is cannot answer all demand, but so we need to make sure we have the right mode at the right place according to the day of the week, the period of the year, according to the purpose of the trip, etc., etc. So this is how we do it. And I would like to say that during the first, let's say 2 hours now, or 1.5 hours, we have been talking a lot about technology, about electrification, for me, technology is part of the solution, but it's not the panacea. So first, we need to make sure that it is integrated into a clear policy to promote and to encourage the alternative mobility solutions other than cars. This is important. So, and yesterday we had the meeting, and I said that I prefer to have a diesel bus on an exclusive lane rather than an electric bus stuck in traffic. Because if we want people, they don't care when they don't care if the bus is electric or diesel or polluting or not polluting. What they want, they want to go from A to B.
They don't care?
When you travel, you don't care.
Oof.
What you want to travel safely, to travel on time, to have a high frequency of buses. If I tell you, you will have an electric bus every 15 minutes or a diesel bus every 5 minutes, you will tell me I prefer diesel
All
bus
right,
every 5 minutes.
go to the microphone if you don't care if your bus is electric or not. If you don't care. No one is going to the
As
microphone.
long as it is
no one in
punctual.
this room is going to the microphone.
Yeah.
So everyone cares here.
Of course, we prefer it is electric, but first we prefer to have more public transport. And then, if it's electric, it's better, and if the electricity is coming from renewables, is even better. There is a priority.
I'm wondering if you're sitting next to your nemesis. Elaine.
There will still be people in private vehicles. And what we're doing in terms of introducing electric vehicles will decarbonize the private vehicle side. But they're complementary with the use of public transportation.
Certainly. Of course, we cannot have our cities or our counties without cars. Certainly, we need cars in low-density areas, in times where we don't have any other choice. But cars should not be the first choice, because we see now why we are meeting here today, because of the nuisances of cars, because of the consequences of cars. Otherwise, we don't have transforming transportation.
Ooh, it's getting... Is it just me that's hot? Elaine, go ahead.
So let me start by talking about our philosophy at General Motors of the future. So first of all, our vision that guides everything we do is zero emissions, zero crashes, zero congestion between electric vehicles and autonomous vehicles and autonomous features to help prevent those crashes and congestion. And we've set a goal of having the capacity to make 1 million EVs in each of North America and China by 2025. In the US, we've set a goal that 50% of our sales will be EVs by 2030. And globally, a goal that there'll be zero emissions from our light-duty vehicles by 2035. As an automaker, we think our future is all electric. And part of our approach to ensuring that we can make that transition is to offer an EV for everybody, that they will be in different price points, in different sizes, and different shapes to keep a wide range of needs. Now, there's lots of regulatory incentives to reduce the emissions of vehicles. But what's really changing the game right now in the leading markets is the models that are coming into the market that are more full substitutes for the internal combustion engine vehicle that you might otherwise buy. In those leading markets, I'm going to talk about China. I'll start by talking about the markets that are farthest along: China, Europe, the US. But what do I mean by a full substitute? They have longer ranges so that they're not just a short-range vehicle. The weighted average range of EVs sold in the US last year was 300 miles. And how is this possible? Well, battery costs have been falling dramatically. They're down 90% in the decade between 2010 and 2020. And that means simply we can put more battery in a vehicle and offer a longer range. And then those vehicles are across a wider range of price points. So they're not just luxury vehicles, which was the entry point, but there's mainstream entries. Go ahead.
What's at the bottom price range? What's the entry-level price range?
Actually, in China, we sell the EV50 or the Mini for about $5,000 equivalent. But in the U.S., we sell the Chevrolet Bolt for a price that's south of $30,000. The Chevrolet Equinox is coming to market this year around $30,000. Those are pretty mainstream price points. And then when you add on policy incentives, that price differential narrows even more, right? So one thing is just the inherent increase or decrease in the cost of batteries that goes on through technological development. But in many markets, that initial push has come from either subsidies or tax cuts that have enabled that reduction. So in the US, for example, in the Inflation Reduction Act will enable a credit of up to $7,500 on EVs for a decade, contingent on those EVs being manufactured in North America, assembled in North America, having battery components for North America and critical minerals from North America or free trade partners. Those are really powerful drivers. And then you end up getting these exponential curves. So in China, last year, 21% of new vehicle sales were EVs. That's up from 4% in 2020. So more than 5x. In Europe, 12%, up from 5% 2 years earlier. In the US, we're behind, but 5%, up from under 2% in 2020. You end up getting these exponential curves.
Elaine, I'm just going to ask you to pause for a moment. Don't forget where you are in our conversation, because Felipe's face looks like it has something amazing to share with us. What is going on in your head, Felipe? Go ahead.
No, I'm thinking about your first question. What good examples we have around the world
Sure.
in terms of what we are doing. And I think we have done really good in some places, and we have to encourage some other places to do as good as some others have done. A good example of what we are doing in India, for example, we managed to procure 5,000 buses, electric buses, and in India, they developed a new way to do it in order to go through different states, different cities, and organize, standardize the way the buses, the electric buses, were think. That's very important because actually what we have found in other geographies, as in Latin America, is that the capex is still very, very expensive in terms of what we are looking for our electric buses. Of course, in terms of operation, we find that it's cheaper. However, in terms of capex, it's still very, very expensive. So finding out that it's possible to reduce 30% of the price of electric buses is a very good example that we have something to do in the world, that we are really going the right way, and that we are going to be able to build a sustainable transportation for everyone, that we can fight the climate change. So that's a very interesting example. And then, of course, I want to share my experience when I was a practitioner. I was one of these guys that we had in the last conversation. I was the chief of transportation in Bogota, and before that, I was the CEO for Transmilenio. And there we managed to get 1,485 electric buses. Somewhere here in this scenario is Juan Pablo Carejo, who was also the chief of transportation on that moment, and he managed to do 485 of those, and then after we did 1,000 more. Those are great news, because a Latin American city became one of the biggest fleet in the world with electric buses. That's showing that it's possible, that we can fight climate change, and that we can do better, that we can build more biking paths, more walking paths, and actually have more electric transportation, which is what we want. Unfortunately, in the next years, till 2050, we're looking to have 2 billion more cars in our cities. And I agree with you. We need to have less of those and have more sustainable transportation, walking, biking, and public transport.
May I add one? What you did first in Bogota, you first introduced the BRT, so it means that you put the buses in exclusive lanes, and then you convert them to electric. And this is the way to do it. First, make sure you have the priority for buses. And you said first is zero emission and then zero congestion. I would say first is zero congestion and then zero emission, because a clean traffic jam is still a traffic jam. So if you are in your car in a traffic jam and your car is electric, okay, you don't pollute. But at the end of the day, you will spend more time in traffic. You will be late for your work or your family visit, etc. You will, electric car or a diesel car at the end of the day for road safety is the same, you know. So what you need less cars, because when you are on public transport, you pollute 4 to 5 times less. You create less accidents. It's good for health, for cardiovascular diseases, for obesity. Today there was a communication of the World Health Organization about that, etc., etc. It creates more jobs. So that's what we need to take into consideration, not just the emissions. We need to take into consideration the whole impact on the economy.
I think that different transport modes serve different parts of your urban and suburban and rural layout. And so different cities will fit different things. I'm a huge public transport fan myself. And there's lots of densities where that's very helpful, as is things like ride hailing and stuff where you take away the spaces for parking and you have a more limited set of vehicles. Circulating is one way to achieve it. There are different solutions for different locations, but let's not forget that outside of, in less dense areas is where vehicles do more mileage. So you need a combination and right, in order for that, there's still strong preferences in many places for private transportation. It depends on the quality of public transportation. So in order to really achieve that greener transportation outcome, you need a mix of those. And in terms of avoiding crashes and congestions, these driver assistance features and ultimate progress towards widespread use of autonomous vehicles where the error rate will be lower than human error and you prevent crashes that cause congestion, that will also help to achieve your goals of that avoided stress and time loss and productivity loss from sitting in traffic.
So I'm going to tell you something, audience. Dr. Holmes says, Elaine Mohammed and Felipe should go first. Because, why, Dr. Holmes, in our conversation?
I did anticipate this debate about modal shift. I think it's been on the agenda for 20 years. More. Even before the first transforming transportation. And I expect it to still be there 20 years from now. But I'm with you today because this plenary is about decarbonizing the transportation system no matter which modes you choose. And actually, I do not anticipate that in 20 years, we will still be debating a shift between fossil fuels and electricity for the modes that require motor propulsion. In fact, I grieve at the possibility that the World Bank in 20 years would be hosting a meeting where we're still not sure whether decarbonization of the transportation sector involves massive participation from our electric sector, which up until now, almost 2 hours into our program, has barely been mentioned. We need a multi-sectoral engagement in the transformation of the transportation sector, involving the utilities that are at the seams of the transportation sector and the renewable energy that is essential to decarbonizing its future. I'm here because I believe that at the heart of that transition is the decarbonization of public transportation as an act of prioritization in the face of demands for equity that cannot be denied, both procedural equity and distributive equity. And when we recognize that this is overdue, we will move to repair and align our investment portfolios in a way that does accelerate the deployment of the all-electric transportation fleet that we know is used for the most passenger trips in all of the cities that have a green future. That's what I had in mind.
So maybe we should talk a little bit about forecasts of where we expect to be in 10 years. So again, I think in the countries that are further along in EV adoption, you really get this exponential curve where you increase at an increasing rate. But just to give you a sense of it, third-party forecasts center on EVs being 30% of China's sales in 2025 and 50% in 2030. In Europe, it's 25% in 2025 and 60% in 2030. I'll come to the developing world in a second. In the US, it's about 17% and 45% in 2030, which aligns with the White House goals. But in Mexico, an exceedingly ambitious goal, but the president's goal is 50% of new vehicle sales in 2030 will be EVs. In Saudi Arabia, the UAE is actually trying to lead with government vehicles. 20% of government vehicles by 2030. But what does that mean environmentally? So there's a great paper by Steve Holland, Eric Manser, and Andrew Yates that it's US research, but I think it's an example that says, okay, well, if you could transition to 100% EVs, then, and you could set charging, so a lot of the charging happens during the daytime hours when renewables are heavily available. They actually think they could net reduce just electricity sector emissions by inducing more entry of renewables so that electricity emissions go down. And then, on top of that, you avoid all of the emissions from the internal combustion engine vehicles. So this is actually quite a powerful transition if you're pairing the shift to EV with more renewables in your electric grid.
What about the affordability of these vehicles? I mean, now you mentioned earlier an example of the cost of a vehicle is $30,000. You said is the, yeah, this is 30 years of using public transport in a city like Paris, not considering the cost of parking, the cost of insurance, etc., etc. I mean, the cars are becoming bigger and bigger. They are becoming more and more expensive. They are not for the. They are only for selected number of people. It's not for the wider population. I think we need to have an approach where we consider the mobility of all and not the happy few.
Absolutely. And I'm here to talk primarily about the auto market. So I'm not saying that. I mean, I grew up here in Washington, D.C., actually, and started my career at the IMF. I've spent much of my life on public transport, and I now live in a place that has almost none in Michigan. So a few different answers to that. First of all, there are different price points in different markets, but battery costs have come down 90% in 10 years, okay? From over $1,000 per kilowatt hour to a little over $100 per kilowatt hour. The amount of research being directed at batteries right now, globally, public and private, is massive. It is on par with a Manhattan Project or a COVID vaccine effort. All right, we have every reason to believe that that will enable breakthroughs that will help adjust this price differential between internal combustion engine vehicles and EVs, even without any sort of price subsidies. In addition, part of the way, even in the US, vehicles have about 4 owners over their lifetime. So the new vehicle buyer buys in at a price point that $30,000 is kind of mainstream for the US. But then EVs would move, just like internal combustion vehicles, over their lifetime to people who have to buy at lower price points. And part of achieving that is making sure that there's ample public charging. So it's available if you live in an apartment, if you need to charge at work, and not just to people who own their home and can install private charging, who are the leading edge of EV adoption in many countries. But you need a different mix. Just at the same time, in China, a lot of the EVs that are sold have much shorter ranges because much of the driving is within Chinese cities, and people need sort of lower speed driving, lower power, smaller ranges, and that makes the vehicles a lot more affordable. Different needs, different vehicles for different countries and different needs.
Dr. Holmes, go ahead.
Well, I do think we might be sliding back to the modal shift question again. And so I want to implore our online audience, which I know is many times bigger than the one right here, to be thinking about what it would take to make sure that every vehicle, no matter what type it is, no longer burns fossil fuels under a hood. What are the steps between here and there? And we have a very large audience here that has a very strong representation from the multilateral development banks. Yet the multilateral development bank portfolios do not yet show a level of internal coordination between the electric power sector and the transportation sector that enables us to never buy another fossil-fueled public transportation vehicle in the cities that have already declared that that's the future they want. And I can cite the C40 Cities Pledge, which is now many more than 40 cities, maybe 100 cities, but there are dozens of them that have pledged to never buy another fossil-fueled bus after 2025, but have also been invited to be the faculty member at multiple clean bus finance academies hosted by the same international network, where around the room for days at a time, there does not appear to be the level of financial confidence that it would be possible to make this type of change. And what I believe is possible in this plenary is to invite into the next 2 days a more integrated kind of conversation, even drawing on the inspiration of Mr. Picard, that at the seams between the transportation sector and the electric power sector, there is a set of infrastructure that allows us to send electricity both directions, from the batteries on the cars to the grid and back and forth, that makes both of the transitions for transportation and the electric power sector faster, more affordable, and more safe. These are the types of imaginative and creative and resourceful solutions that I think that this year's Transforming Transportation can illuminate and allow us to accelerate.
Felipe, help us understand safer, greener transport for all from the WRI perspective.
So what we're looking for is to work on field. Listening to you, I really like this conversation, and this transport mode shifting, so important, that we are looking for and we have been looking for several years. What we are looking now is how we do this in reality. We have a lot of people here who works in field, actually, who comes from international offices that are working exactly in the cities and know what is exactly happening there. So we cannot miss what reality looks like. What is that is people looking for, how we communicate with communities, how we talk with them, and how we understand what they are looking for. And you use a word that I really like, and it's affordability. How we do so we have our transportation systems affordable for everyone. How can we encourage, if we want to shift, if we want to do that transition, that something in reality happens? When I was the CEO of Transmilenio, I had to deal with the pandemic and the worst riots that happened in Bogota in its history. That was so revealing for me because, of course, all the fight that we were doing in terms of public transportation, modal shift, at some point was destroyed. And actually, people go back to the motorcycles. People went back to their cars because they were afraid of dying in the public transport systems. So how do we fight with these kind of things? How do we really go there, talk with communities, and find out what they are looking for? That's something that is very important that we cannot miss in this conversation here, because actually what is happening out there in the cities is quite different to what is happening here in this room. So we have to understand exactly what and how are we going to encourage people to move in more sustainable ways. And that's why infrastructure and financing that infrastructure is so important. Because if we don't have safe infrastructure for people, if we don't build roads that are usable for these people, we cannot encourage them to walk, bike, or use the public transport systems.
Felipe, that question you asked, do you know the answer to it?
Oh, no, I think nobody
Because
here
I feel like there's somebody here or online that probably has the answer.
I think nobody here have that question. Otherwise, we wouldn't be meeting here. We would be just working out there, making it happen.
Right.
So I think that's actually the work that we have here. We have some examples that have been successful, some places, some others that we tried to replicate, and we're not that successful. So we have to understand, depending on each geography, what exactly is happening. In Africa, for example, we need to work more on 2- and 3-wheelers rather than other systems. Of course, we need to do some other things, but first of all, we have to tackle 2- and 3-wheelers and decarbonize 2- and 3-wheelers because it's actually what it's growing faster. But of course, we have to work in BRT systems as the infrastructure they already have in Addis, but we have to make it operate, or some other places in Africa. But I think there's not just one answer. That's actually why we think in WRI this is a systemic approach. We have to think in many different things at the same time. There is no just one answer, and we have to think about everything. Actually, I will add to this, inclusive. We need to think about gender equity when we are thinking about infrastructure, when we are thinking about how people is commuting, and we have to understand that there are so many other options, rather different to the ones that we have right now.
I'm really enjoying this conversation on the stage, but I don't want it to be exclusive. I want it to be inclusive. So in the room, the microphone is there. Don't just line up in the last 5 minutes, because I will just literally say last person and we will move on. Yes, thank you. And online, I'm also going to check in online as well. Okay, let's start. Yes, sir. Thank you so much. Go ahead.
Jason, not sir. Thank you. My
Hello,
name is
Jason.
Jason Meggs. I'm with the District Department of Transportation here in DC, but
Sure.
with a background in transport policy and climate health and equitable mobility for the European Union, for the state of California, and various NGOs. There are billions of people in this world who will not ever own an electric car and who we cannot serve effectively with public transport. And even in every country, there are folks who fit that description. Per the wonderful speech earlier from Pritchard about needing to change the narrative and how we think, they made a lightweight electric airplane. If we can make vehicles lighter, we can accelerate their adoption and minimize their harm in every respect, every co-benefit you might imagine. Lightweight electric vehicles include the very market-available electric bicycles, tricycles, and trailers, which have fundamentally been out of the policy question. I will mention in passing also on-grid catenary wire heavy vehicles have been out of the policy question. My graduate work at Berkeley, I studied and actually worked with the Transmilenio system in Bogota to do a study on the maximum potential to electrify that system without using a battery, which, by the way, the billions around the world, the poor billions, are probably more likely to be killed by an electric car, which is faster and heavier, does more roadway damage, than to benefit as the environmental pollution and the resource demands actually reduce their
Jason,
capacity.
you have six people behind you staring
I understand,
at the back
but
of your
remember
head.
I was last in line for Pritchard, and
I see you.
So,
go ahead with your question.
but because this is off the radar and it is so important, this is our shortest path as far as I know, it needs to be part of the discussion. Cheaper, sooner, much less harmful. If you have a lightweight electric vehicle, maybe it goes 20 miles per hour, 30 miles per hour, up to 40, 50, and you can there's a middle ground that's barred by regulations where you can be faster, carry more people, more cargo, but still be a lightweight vehicle. Point is, how can we get this in the agenda? Have you considered it? What is the next step? That's my question. Thank you.
I'd say that regulatory incentives to improve the fuel economy of vehicles has led to a lot of lightweighting of those components of the vehicles that are the same, whether they're internal combustion engine vehicles or EVs. And so that's one route. And again, different needs for different markets with different speeds.
But we shouldn't exclude an option as we have these options I'm mentioning. That's the point. But I'm not trying to put you on the defensive. I know we need cars. Unfortunately, electric cars don't give us much benefit in terms of emissions, certainly not in the near term. But anyone else on the panel who could
Cities like DC
speak
are doing
to this?
things to make it more accessible and safe to use things like bicycles, right? So there are all these bike lanes that have come up here. There are bike lanes in many cities. So the moves around that help induce safe use of vehicles that complement cars and complement walking and complement public transportation
Yes.
and things
So
like
Jason, I'm
bike
gonna push on because we actually have more than you in the conversation. But we have coffee breaks, we have lunch breaks, and our experts aren't going anywhere. Jason, stand by. Felipe, how do you want to answer Jason's comment?
Yeah, very short. 1.3 million people dies yearly because of car crashes, right?
The immediate death, yes. There's many more who are
So
Jason, I'm going to ask you to take a seat because otherwise you're just taking all of the time of your co-attendees, and I will come back to you another time, but let's have a seat.
Thank you. I love your sense of humor. See you later.
Thank you.
Definitely we have to work on road safety, and we have to encourage to understand how it works. I would just add one very important concept. We are talking here about complete streets. So we all have to fit in a very narrow space. Public space is where we all meet together as equals. So we have to understand how we move all there and how we make those places safer. So I think that's the answer for that. We have to tackle and to save 1.3 million people who is dying yearly.
Very good. Online, I know you are dying to answer a question and ask a question. Cecilia, hello.
Hi, hello.
Hi. How's it
I
going?
think, Elaine, you are extremely popular online, not only on the crowd. So there is a lot of questions in two sets. People are happy with having this, as you call it, Manhattan Project that is emerging in the US, the Infrastructure Reduction Act and all. But there are two elements that people would like to understand a little bit better. One is what is really the role of car manufacturers and General Motors in particular along the supply chain, particularly on battery production, given that most of the mineral processing still happens in China. So that is one of the set of questions.
Cecilia, can we take that one first of all? Because it's hard to remember two long questions. So let's take that one first of all, and then we'll come right back to you
Terrific,
online.
thanks.
Yeah.
So first of all, we've done a lot of work on our mineral sourcing to find sources that are alternatives that, at least for US production, are North American or allied countries. We are sourcing, for example, some of our cobalt out of Australia. We're sourcing lithium through North America out of California. And there's a wide range of commitments that we've been making and announcing across about 8 different critical EV components that goes back about 18 months now. And in addition, though, I think we also have to talk about ethical sourcing from the developing world, since we're here at the World Bank with this global audience. And it's a complex topic, and we're taking a lot of initiatives, but I'd like to highlight a few of those. So first of all, in many cases we're signing, or in a number of cases, we're signing agreements directly with mines that enables us to incorporate ESG language directly in those contracts. We're members of the Initiative for the Responsible Mining Assurance, which has a very strong mining standard and certification process, and they certify social and environmental standards at mine sites with standards that were developed with a wide range of stakeholders. Similarly, we support initiatives like the RMI Pact, which was developed by the Responsible Business Alliance Foundation. And for example, in cobalt mining communities in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, it also is supporting vocational training to give at-risk youth alternative career paths. So we're tackling this from many angles simultaneously.
Great. We are going to give Elaine a break, and then we're going to come right back to you, Cecilia, with that second question. Okay. All right. Great. Hello.
Hello, my name is Caetano de Campos Lopez. I work here in Virginia for a nonprofit called Community Climate Collaborative, and also for the University of Virginia with clean and equitable transportation topics. Originally, I'm from Brazil, very close to that picture behind you. So my question is, this panel is about decarbonizing mobility. And we have discussed a little bit about technology options, and my question is more about, can you share a little bit from your perspective of the role of community design, system design, usage patterns? Because we know that any particular type of vehicle is cleaner per passenger if you have more people on board. So, yeah, decarbonizing through ways different than technology only.
Who feels capable to handle that? Mohammed? You mentioned tech at the beginning, a little bit.
Yes, no, you are fully right, because we need to make sure that these vehicles, that there are people in the vehicles, in the buses. So that's why it's important, if we want these people to come to the buses, is that we give also the priority to buses on the road, that they have exclusive lanes, that there is an integration of the whole system, there is integrated ticketing and integrated information, that it's easy to go from A to B. And I would say is important to think the system not from station to station, but from door to door. So making sure that we can combine all modes easily and that they are all integrated in the same tariff system. That's very important. And we see it still, unfortunately, in a lot of cities there are different operators and there is no integration of this tariff system. That's why it's important to have transport authorities which are in charge of this integration, even if we have 10 operators or more. So we need to design the system and to approach it from the perspective of the user, of the traveler, and not from the perspective of the institutions or from the perspective of the operator. That's very important. And so yeah, I can only support what you said, and this is also our role at UITP to increase awareness about that. And to make sure it's the whole system which is efficient and not only the sum of each component.
Any more on tech?
No, I just completely agree with Mohamed. Efficiency, it's about technology, but also how we design our cities. So that efficiency depends on how fast or how easily we make people to access our systems and to move around. So it's just the same.
Hello.
Hi, it's Jaman Koba here from the International Transport Workers Federation, and I just wanted to follow up on the point on inclusivity. So one of the kind of key groups that has not been mentioned so far are workers, the men and women who keep transport systems moving. And there's two parts to this, which I'd love the panelists' views on. Firstly, the fact that these people, the workers, are best placed to inform how planning can be done because they do it every day. They're the people who keep it running. They can see what works and what doesn't. And we've seen ourselves, up to the work we've done, how talking to them about informal work, how talking to them about 2- and 3-wheelers, or talking about new technology, all of that can help with planning, but often it isn't done. So that's one part. And the other part is the way that we move forward, the way that investment happens, has implications for jobs, has implications for what kinds of jobs are available, who it goes to. If we talk about things like gender, things like youth work, all of that has to be built in or it doesn't happen. Similarly, training, what training is done in order for new jobs to go to the workers that are being displaced. All of those issues need to be considered, but often in conversations they're missed. So it'd be really great to hear the panelists' views on how we can make sure that workers are part of the planning and the process as we move forward. Thank you. Sorry.
Felipe.
So I will go back again to my background. So we created a public operator in Bogota, and what we wanted to do with that was not just to operate specific routes, but also to make this operator inclusive for women. So we were working with the Secretary of Women in Bogota, and we understand that there are some things that we call care blocks. What is that care blocks? What we were looking for were what kind of services we have to provide so when we offer a job, women can really access to that job. So what is that is preventing women to work in a transport system? There are several studies that shows that actually women drivers do better than men. There are several studies that show that actually when there is a woman driving a bus, then there are some other women that want to be on that bus. There are several studies that also show that harassment decreases when there is a driver who is a woman. So how do we do so women come to work in a mainly men work? So we find out that if we connect these two things, care system, providing services, easily as laundry or taking care of children or elderly, there were possibilities so women can access to these jobs. And then we started doing this, and I think it's going really well. This is not a unique example in the world. There are so many others in terms of how we really work on equity rather than equality in order to be able to have more people accessing these kind of jobs and to understand that they are doing really good. And actually, it's really helping not just themselves in terms of getting this job, but also society who is benefited around this accessibility to jobs.
On this question of workers, thank you for the question, because in UITP we collaborate a lot with the International Transport Workers Federation.
Excuse me 1 second. if you're going to say it to each other, you have to say it to us at the end.
Please.
Now we need to know what it is.
She won't let me continue, please.
Yeah. No, go on. Go. What were you saying to each other?
I said, I love that. That was so important. Because the social and cultural transformations that frame what we believe is possible is the underpinnings of the paradigms that currently trap us. If we can transcend patriarchy, we can definitely transcend fossil fuels.
This is why no whispering is allowed, because that whisper was meant to be heard. All right, Mohammed, so sorry to interrupt you. The naughty people at the end of the panel were chatting.
Just to come back, because during COVID, we realized the essential role of the workers in public transport. You know, we called them, because they made sure that the service continued to be operated. So we call them the guardians of mobilities in UITP. And on the gender aspect, there are, in generally speaking, there are 20% of the workers in public transport are women, but 55 to even 70% in some countries of the users are women. And so we need to make sure that we have more women working in public transport. In Montreal, they made a very small change in the way they recruit people. They decided that the recruitment panels, they must have women and men in the recruitment panels and not just men, because they realized in the past and by doing that, they hired much more women.
What year did they realize this, Mohammed?
Sorry?
What year did they realize they should have women on the recruitment panel?
I don't remember.
Oh. We're all rolling our eyes.
No, I mean, I am telling you this because
Eureka!
You need
women on the panel.
No, you need to have a certain time to evaluate the efficiency of the measure. So that's why after years, they realized that all the people they hired during, let's say, the 5 last years, they hired much more women. You know, in many companies, they still don't have this kind of mixed panels. Huh? I'm sorry to say that, but this is the reality.
And we're sad.
So I think that the overarching point here is that the importance of surveying and getting input, not necessarily just through surveys, from all the users of the transportation system to make the best decisions, right? From the transportation workers, from private users. There's a terrific 2019 book called Invisible Women that talked about how the failure to adequately get input from women in communities changed transportation investment decisions. For example, putting more into roadways and not enough into sidewalks and pedestrian paths. So key takeaway, you need to get input from all your users.
That was such a great question. Thank you for that question. Cecilia, can we go back to online, please?
Yes. There is a lot of questions about electric cars, but we are going to focus on one that is simple and is addressed to all panelists. What is the most important factor to move away from personal cars to public transportation? 2 elements to mention around that. One is we don't want public transportation to be used because people cannot afford private cars, the income element, and the other element mentioned here is many women will not use public transportation because they don't feel safe. So that's the question. What is the biggest factor to move away and change these behaviors?
Mohammed.
I can try. No, first we need to make sure public transport is available, because the challenge is in some cities it's not available enough. Means it's high frequency, means it goes, you know, a dense network. It goes also beyond the dense city, the city center, I would say, and it goes to the suburbs. So this is first the availability, and then regarding the safety, it's right. In some cities or certain times of the day, for example, it's not safe, and especially for women. And there are some cities, for example, when they decided after a certain time at night that you can divert the bus route to serve, you know, to stop at close to the final destination of the women who is on the bus. So this kind of let's say variety in the way we operate public transport is very important to make it more attractive and more accessible to everyone. And at the end, you know, it's a question of convenience. We need to make it easy to use, easy to understand, available. So it's important. I mean, public transport is an investment, it's not a cost. So we need to understand that, because unfortunately, is in the perception of some people, like public transport is seen as the necessary evil. No, public transport is an investment because of all the benefits that we were discussing earlier. But we need to make sure to understand the specific needs of different types of users and to make sure we answer these needs.
Very, very short, since I kind of already answered this question on the last answer. I just want to highlight, when we were discussing with the World Bank and WRI, what the title of this conference was going to be. That's why we included inclusive mobility, because we really want to discuss here with all of you, how we really do more inclusiveness in the mobility, in the transportation. That's something that we are really looking for. So it's not just about greener, but also inclusive. And then that's why we think at WRI, this is a systemic perspective that we have to take care of. We cannot think about decarbonizing without thinking, how are we going to move our people? We have to think and understand, who are we moving? What kind of people we are working with in our cities? Because that's what we want, right? We want quality of life for people. So if we don't think, who are we working with, then we won't be able to really transform transportation.
I am going to try and do the Q&A version of speed dating. So it's a super fast, efficient, productive question and a super fast, productive, efficient answer. Welcome to Speed Questions.
Thank you. My name is Clayton Lane, formerly with ITDP and WRI. And Elaine, I'm so grateful that you're here with us today and thankful for GM's progress on electrification. My question is about policy. What is GM doing on policy to decarbonize transport? Because the company has historically, it has dozens of lobbyists here in DC that have fought to weaken CAFE standards for fuel economy, also have fought against GHG regulations, and have fought against ambitious targets for zero carbon vehicle or zero emission vehicle adoption in the US. The company also joined legal action in support of the Trump administration to remove California's Clean Air Act waiver, which was key to decarbonization ambition. So again, just why did the company oppose those policies, and what is it doing today to advance decarbonization in public policy?
So I would put your focus on summer of 2021, when at the White House, Mary Barra, our CEO, and the CEOs of Ford and Stellantis were there and pledged to target 40 to 50% EVs by 2030. And President Biden said to Mary Barra, our CEO, you can't catalyze this by saying it's possible. So I think at this point, we're really quite ambitious now. The greenhouse gas and CAFE regulations pose real challenges, but we are using engineering and technology to try to meet those increasingly high standards.
Hello.
Yes, I'm Michael Replogel, founder and senior advisor to the Institute for Transportation and Development Policy and former Transport Deputy Commissioner for New York City. We've seen the faltering of the Global Road Safety Initiative, Decade for Action. We've also seen sharply rising pedestrian and cyclist deaths in the US and some other countries in recent years. And a lot of that's associated with rising vehicle weight and vehicle speeds. What will it take to help the auto industry foster the adoption of lighter, slower accelerating, and safer vehicles, safer for vulnerable road users? Particularly in light of the fact that the auto industry today makes higher profits selling heavier, faster accelerating, motor vehicles, sport utility vehicles, and light trucks? And also to, what will it take to get the auto industry to help foster a shift towards fixing roads to operate more safely rather than just expanding roads, as we see happening in many places?
So I take on the pedestrian safety aspect that I think is at the heart of your question. And that's part of these driver assistance technologies in part. So there's two different things I would really focus on. One is driver assistance technologies like front-end collision prevention that, you know, my car when I drive alerts me to pedestrians, even if they're on the sidewalk when I'm driving, to make sure that they stop. It will stop automatically if someone stops in front of me, or I haven't had it with a sudden crossing pedestrian, but I've had it with a suddenly crossing deer, that it stops to avoid a collision on its own. So that's one side of it. I mean, I think the other thing is we're also very active on making sure that people avoid distracted driving. A big part of the increase in collisions has related actually to our devices, our cell phones, and both pedestrians looking down and not looking up, including when they're jaywalking, and making sure that drivers are not texting and driving. And we even introduced technologies to prevent you from looking or enable you never to look down to help prevent that. So those are some of the ways we're addressing pedestrian safety.
But what about heavier vehicles, the weight of vehicles? You put batteries in a Hummer and it's even more dangerous.
Well, the fuel efficiency and greenhouse gas standards cause us to actually be very cognizant of the weight of vehicles and the weight of different parts. In addition, again, part of this frontier around batteries is improving battery density. So you get the same amount of charge out of a smaller and therefore lighter battery. So we are working hard on both of those fronts with things like the parts of your doors and your bolts that go into the vehicle, as well as the battery component of it.
I am going to ask Cecilia one more time for this session to share a thought, some questions from our online audience.
The chat is exploding here, so...
I thought it might be.
Yeah, well, in any case, going back to the initial comment made in the panel is that somebody, which I think is Mohammed, prefers more public transport than electric, more public transport, even if that public transport is not electric or fully green. Diesel, for instance, I think it mentioned. Somebody in the chat says, well, I'm from Lahore, and with 12 million population, our city has a serious smog issue. And sometimes we just need to shut down school buses and transport to help city breathe a little. So what's your answer to that? And very much related with that, if the change to green, the green part of the inclusive, green and inclusive, is gradual, how gradual shall it be? Are we taking the risk of locking in dirty trajectories?
I would like to repeat what I said because I think it was misunderstood. If I am a user, I prefer to be in a diesel bus but on an exclusive lane, it means much reliable service, than in an electric bus stuck in traffic. This is what I say. Now, coming back to that question, of course, I mean, about the pollution in the city in Pakistan, we need to see this pollution is not coming from buses. Huh? It's coming also from cars. So it's important, of course, that we have clean vehicles, be they cars or buses. So we cannot blame buses only for being at the origin of this pollution. The pollution is coming from all vehicles. And so it's important that we work on all of them. But if we want to have less pollution, we need less cars and more public transport. Because public transport per passenger emits 4 to 5 times less CO2 emissions even local pollutants than cars. That is, it's scientific, you know. It's not me who are announcing that. It's the scientific conclusion of many studies.
I wonder if we might be in a impossible kind of riddle there. And I want to encourage us to imagine that there are hundreds of city mayors that already own thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of mass transit vehicles that are still burning fossil fuels. And the fundamental question in the 20th anniversary of this meeting is why? Why? But we're hosted by the World Bank, and we know implicitly, we're here, that there are financial barriers that are not necessarily at the point of sale, but literally on the balance sheets upon which this entire system is said to rest. And if we are here at the World Bank, let us use the next 48 hours to be engaged in a conversation about what is at the bedrock of these balance sheets that can be strengthened in order to acquire the electric mobility that is necessary to meet the moment. The World Bank sits on the board of the Global Innovation Lab for Climate Finance. That lab has already voted to endorse a solution that would eliminate the upfront cost premiums where it exists for electric mobility, for public transport, and actually for almost any other form of motorized transport. And this will be a subject of session 10 tomorrow with my colleague Margarita Parra speaking on this topic. I urge us to think about reimagining the path to a sustainable and scalable transition that is also extremely rapid, because we've been able to break through barriers to the financial underpinnings for why we have to admit in the last 2 decades we have not bought nearly enough fossil-free BRT buses, even in all of the places where all of the highest elected officials swore that they really wanted more. These are our questions if we are here at Transforming Transportation, and I hope that this will help us be motivated to be curious about some of those breakthroughs, including further engagement with the utility industry. Thank you.
So at the microphone, I see one person who I do recognize. That's Claudia. Hi, Claudia. And 2 people who I don't. Would you say your name, sir? What's your name?
Hi, I'm Fikan from WRI Indonesia.
All right, Fikan. Okay. And what's your name?
My name is Taylor Reich from ITDP.
Fikan, Taylor, Claudia, come to the front of the stage during the coffee break. You're going to get a one-on-one expert conversation with Dr. Holmes, Felipe, Mohammed, and Elaine. Nobody has to listen apart from these it's very special panelists. So you get a very special way to ask your question. So sit down. Because now there is a wonderful opportunity for you to network, also known as the coffee break. The knowledge exhibition is outside. It's extraordinary. Please take a look at it. Thank you for your attention from the beginning of our session right to 11:10. You've deserved your break. Go enjoy it. But before you do that, let's thank our panelists. Fantastic. Thank you. You were great.